Hello, and welcome to Film Bites, the podcast where a lad and his dad talk about films they've just watched. I'm Jack, the lad.
And I'm Andy, the dad. We're here to share our thoughts on the latest movies, classic favourites, and everything in between.
From blockbuster hits to indie gems, we'll give you our take on what's worth watching and what's not.
So grab your popcorn, get comfortable, and join us for some movie talk. Let's roll the intro music and get started. Okay, the main course. Guardians of the Galaxy 3. What better way to celebrate my 50th birthday than seeing this wonderful film? Thanks to you.
Well, yes, I mean, we already knew from the previous two films that Guardians of the Galaxy was something quite special. This wasn't just a Marvel movie or a superhero film. This was a story of characters from different backgrounds. We have characters like Star-Lord, an ordinary human being who has just been snatched from everything he knew and is now being raised by basically space pirates called the Ravagers. We have Gamora, a space assassin, if you will, one of the deadliest women in the galaxy, being raised by one of the most cruel and tyrannical leaders of the entire galaxy as well. She's just trying to find a family, because the one family she knew was snatched away from her as well. Getting kind of theme here. We have Rocky Raccoon, who admittedly doesn't want to be called a raccoon because he doesn't believe he's a raccoon. Again, snatched away from all the kind of things in life that is so special. And we don't quite know what it is yet until Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Groot, we don't know much about, but that's honestly the best way you can do it. Drax, his whole entire family snatched away from him. So these are emotionally unstable, broken, tormented characters thrown together in a galaxy that is so vast, that is so beautiful, and is so cruel, that it's an incredible dynamic to see play out. And I honestly think that Guardians of the Galaxy Volumes 1, 2, how could you beat anything that was there? And I think that Volume 3, I can confidently say, is either on par or better than Volume 1, and definitely better than Volume 2 as well.
For me, I think this is not just the best of the Guardians movies. I think this is probably the best of the MCU movies.
Bold, but yeah, fair.
I think it's an extraordinary film, and I think what James Gunn has done, he's managed to take what's essentially quite a small, difficult, harrowing story and turn it into this special, spectacular finale to a really, really strong series. The second one is a slide dip, but only a slide dip. But this third one is just a little piece of magic.
Definitely.
Right from the opening, where we have the Marvel logo with just the Guardians characters.
Which is so special.
And we have a much more downbeat song at the beginning, which I think already sets that stall out that we're going to be in for a different ride with the Guardians this time.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, does it take us on a ride?
It does.
Wow. From the opening of Quill being basically a wreck.
Yeah.
Because of what obviously happened with the Gamora storyline.
Yes, and especially with Infinity War, with the decision that was made from his part. Because it's, human torment, emotional torment.
I mean, I think you told me that Gunn himself said that he wouldn't have wanted to do that storyline with Gamora. You can fully see why in this story.
Definitely.
Because it did have a much more crabby dynamic between those two characters.
Which still really worked, man.
It did.
Gunn had an incredibly hard job to do. He basically had the decisions of the Guardians essentially made for him. After Guardians 2, we went into the realm of Infinity War, which inevitably killed off Gamora with the Soul Stone. But the problem with doing that is that you've taken away a core aspect of the team, which was the romantic dynamic between Quill and Gamora. It was their retribution, let's say, in terms of things. I don't know if that's quite the right term, but we'll go with it. But Gunn basically had to step in where Thor was already a part of the team now. That had to be somehow retconned so that he didn't have to handle an entirely different character from an entirely different franchise as well. Which, thank God, frankly, that went away. We have the Guardians to focus on with the dynamic, with everything that's been built up. I mean, we've got new members on the team like Nebula and Mantis, and to see how their dynamic plays out as well. And there was so many things that were interesting to see where could this film take things. And, you know, when it was announced that we'd be getting the High Evolutionary, that was just, oh. If you knew as a comic book fan, this was one of the most heart-wrenching stories that could be done. And it was a question of, okay, well, we've got the Guardians of the Galaxy fighting a character that is essentially a god, or someone that thinks themselves a god because he creates things that are of a new civilization, the perfect thing. And there is no perfect thing. That's the problem.
That's really the backbone to this story, and we'll come to him in a second. But I just think the way that Gunn wrote for each individual character, no one was left out. No one was left behind in this story. Everybody had a part to play.
Yes.
It was done with humour. It was done also, in some cases, quite dark storylines.
Oh, definitely.
And that's for all of them. They've all got this kind of uptick and downtick to each of their story in this film. But he's just done such a good job. He's just made it believable. And this third film, which is Rocket's movie.
Yes.
It's Rocket's story. And going back now and looking to revisit those first two movies, you can tell that actually this has been setting you up all along for this story.
Yes.
And it's utterly heartbreaking in places. I've never felt that kind of choked up emotion in a Marvel film. Whilst I wasn't bawling, there were certain parts when I was like, really difficult to get through.
I felt my heart hurt. And I also felt almost on the brink of feeling crying. I didn't cry as such, but it was certainly those kind of gut-wrenching moments that made you go, oh, this is just... No. You've got this raccoon that's so innocent. How can you do something like this?
Yeah. I mean, it was a really strong origin of how Rocket came to be. And just the dynamic with the other, we'll call them friends.
Yeah, just simply friends.
What happens with those friends and the way in which the High Evolutionary goes about doing this is just wow. And to say that James Gunn has somehow managed to persuade Marvel to do this and to allow him to do this.
Yeah, they really get away with them.
It's very strong. I mean, the last time I think I was sort of iffy about a film's age rating, I think has to go all the way back to Temple of Doom.
Oh, God, yeah.
Which was astonishing for a 12 film. But this one, I think, is very close to the line of it could have been a 15 quite easy.
There's certainly a particular sequence that pops in my mind when we say, should this have been a 12? I won't say which scene it is, but it involves Rocket, and it is just, oh, okay, now I get it.
I mean, let's talk about the actor. Now, we're probably going to get his name wrong.
Yes.
Chukwudi Iwuji.
Amazing actor.
Just an astonishing performance. I mean, I've only really kind of seen him previously in the other Gunn project, Peacemaker, where he was okay. He was just a character that was there. But in this, he has so much presence on the screen. He's an absolute monster.
A monster with a god complex as well. And those kind of characters just create suspense, and any kind of movie does is unpredictable. And that's the beauty of the character.
I think if you compare the High Evolutionary to Ego in the previous one, who was also a monster, and also a god, I just felt much more believing in what this guy was doing, interfering with.
Yes.
The nature of his villainy, I think, was much more believable. He's a much more boo-hiss villain than Ego was. Probably intentionally, but it certainly worked. And just... It takes something for you to feel strongly about a character on screen. And he absolutely nailed this.
Yes.
He was a proper old school baddie that you just didn't want to see win out. And like with any Marvel film, we're going to have a fairly linear thing of goodies and baddies and what happens to them. But there's much more peril in this than I was anticipating.
It's because it's the last one as well.
Yeah.
We really have no idea where this is going to go for our Guardians.
You don't know if they're getting out alive, you think, and that's something that's present all the way through this film.
Yeah.
And again, the music in the film, I mean, that's been a signature thing throughout the Guardians movies. Again, I thought, whilst you were right in saying that it didn't necessarily have the magic of the first film, but that first film we were introduced to this style.
I also just think each song that occurs, so you've got I believe the first film is 70s music, edging into the 80s, and then you've got the second film which is 80s, getting out the 70s, and then the next one is, I don't want to say too much, but I think it's quite an obvious kind of memo, if you will, of where the kind of next soundtracks go into the kind of century, let's say.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, he's gone from having a Walkman to a Microsoft Zune.
Yes, which, does anyone remember a Zune is all I'm going to ask.
Funnily enough, I remember it, but it's something that nobody would have wanted.
Exactly.
You either had the Apple, which was the iPod was the top end, or you had those cheap, dodgy ones you'd get from China with 32 megabytes. You'd fit about 3 albums on, but they'd still do the same job at about a third of the price of the Zune. So, and I think that's part of the reason why there was a demise. But it does give them a good license to be able to put this music all the way up to the noughties in this if you want to. So, yeah, no, absolutely inspired. I mean, just every single one of these characters. It's Rocket Story. We're not going to give away any spoilers about Rocket Story, but it is powerful.
I think it's one of the best stories for a character that we've seen in the entire MCU. I'm standing by that statement.
And you can tell that Bradley Cooper believes.
Oh, if you ever get the chance to as well, listeners, I would absolutely recommend you watch the behind the scenes of Bradley Cooper playing Rocket Raccoon. He is just in that moment. He is the character. He believes what he's saying. He acts in such a way that makes him almost already understand the origin. I wouldn't be surprised if he almost had an Alan Rickman treatment where he was told the big reveal in the very first movie, where he was literally told, out of all the actors, he was told what the origins of Harry Potter really was, with what he was to Harry and what he was to his mother. That kind of thing. I wouldn't be surprised if he did know something like that. And if he didn't, you can still believe it even in the first few films, because they have been hinting up to this point heavily that this is something.
There were large parts in this film where I was forgetting about the fact that we've got a CGI character on screen.
Honestly, I was believing that we had a talking raccoon. It was that believable.
I mean, it's staggering, really. I mean, we know that CGI has come a long way in a very short space of time. But let's be honest, we've seen CGI in Marvel stuff of late. It's just not been the quality that perhaps it was building towards. I don't think this film suffered from that problem whatsoever.
I think this film was treated with a great utmost amount of care, and that is something that needed to happen, because the other movies recently, and I will just say, has had a dip. I think the standouts have been movies after Endgame, such as No Way Home. Shang-Chi, I think, needs to be talked about more with the kind of storytelling and mythology that's behind it.
Another beautiful film.
And again, cinematography and the action, everything was great. And I think Black Widow was an okay film as well. I don't think it was as bad as what people said.
Agreed.
I think that a lot of other things, such like Thor: Love and Thunder, I think that was the weakest, and Eternals tried too much to be something else.
Well, I think with Eternals, I think it was a case of probably studio indecision of where to go with it. It felt like it was 2 movies.
I'd say 3, honestly. It felt like 3 parts.
Yeah, and it was almost like it was cut together, but forgot somewhere along the line to build your characters up properly.
Yeah.
So I ended up coming away from that feeling really quite empty. But, I mean, shocking for me was how good Ragnarok was, and then Thor: Love and Thunder
was just a massive decline. It felt like we went back to something like Thor: The Dark World.
Yeah, it was just an absolute mess. I mean, Taika Waititi did such a good job with Ragnarok, and it was just, I don't know, but we're not here to talk about that.
No, we're here to talk about the absolute gorgeous masterpiece that James Gunn has directed, written, and also starred in.
I mean, just going off on a tangent slightly, the fact that he's moved across to DC can only mean good things for DC.
I don't think we need to worry at all.
I mean, you and I, we both liked Zack Snyder's cut
Oh, yeah.
of Man of Steel. We liked his Justice League. But I'm really, really excited to see what James Gunn puts together
With Superman. Yeah.
I mean, Superman has had such a checkered history on screen.
Yeah.
I mean, the 78 version, great.
If anything, the 78 version is the definition of what Warner Brothers understands.
But it's dated now.
It has unfortunately dated.
Reese's performance was exactly what you expect from Superman, but I thought Cavill did an equal job to that.
I think those two are the standard you need to meet. It's almost like you need a fusion of those two characters with something a little extra.
So for him to be taking on Superman and building this universe, best of luck to him, because he's done something in the MCU which I didn't think was possible.
Yeah.
He's kind of done a film that's both standalone but part of an entire story.
Yes, yeah.
I think, again, now that you've taken away the Infinity Stones,
Which they needed to.
yeah, now that you've got rid of that story and it's now on to something different, this one doesn't have to worry about any of that. It can just tell a really good story about really good characters in really perilous situations.
Yes.
And it just does it so well. We loved the holiday special, so we knew that we were in truth going into this, but I don't think I was expecting it to be this good.
Yeah.
All of the actors concerned, they're all on top of the game.
Yeah. I mean, even new additions to the Guardians scene with Will Poulter playing Adam Warlock. I mean, there was a large complaint about the amount of time that Adam Warlock was on screen. The recorded time, I believe, is around 10 minutes. And I remember I told you this, and you said, well, that's not a lot. And I immediately said to you, how much screen time do you think Darth Vader has in Episode 4 of A New Hope? Yeah. And it is, I believe, either 6 or 8 minutes. And every time you see that monster on screen, that so mysterious, so authoritative and commanding in every moment he is on screen, this character always makes a kind of part that is just so incredibly special. Like, he's literally in the film for 6 minutes, but he holds his own so well. And I still think with this movie, whilst Gunn has gone on record and said he felt like he needed the character and he didn't know what to do with it, but he did what he had to with what he knew, I still think he did an incredible job with that.
And I think
it was great.
That has to be down to the terrific work that Will Poulter put into this.
Absolutely. I mean, he's not comic book Adam Warlock by any means. If you know the comics, he is not that character. And I'm fine with that. He's basically a man baby that's just gotten out of his pod and is like, oh, I've got these powers. What am I going to do? Oh, Mother, hello. And he's just going around the place.
Do you think he could be Booster Gold?
That's not a bad shout. I think Booster Gold needs to be someone with a bit of cockiness, tragedy, but also hilarity to it. And I think Will Poulter has those charms because we've seen him in Dope Sick, which was a fantastic show and would recommend. It's heavy stuff, heavy duty, but it shows he can absolutely act. Do I think he'd be a good Booster Gold? I think he'd be a good one, but I think he'd be a fantastic Jimmy Olsen.
Yes.
I just think he'd be absolutely excellent. And don't make him just a sidekick, make him actually a part.
Yeah, he was very impressive in this film. I'm really pleased with what we had on screen. And the way in which they played him as well. I mean, it did tie into the second movie quite well.
Oh, yeah.
And gave you an understanding as to why we've got this iteration character. But other characters, I mean, Cosmo.
Oh, Cosmo's great.
Cosmo is fantastic.
Yeah. Don't call her a bad dog. Don't call her a bad dog. Oh, yes. No, it's a good dog.
Just in case there's any dogs listening.
Yes, good boy. You're all good dogs.
But wow, it was wonderful. Wonderfully comic timing. Just the perfect foil for things that go on screen. There's another cameo in here. I'm not going to say the name.
Yes.
But I'm so pleased that cameo happened.
Yes. Yeah.
I thought that if we just go through the Guardians themselves, Drax, I thought, was allowed to shine.
Oh, much better. Much better.
We had Nebula, was much more fleshed out.
And again, credit to Karen Gillan where it's due. I mean, the direction that she was told in the very first movie to kind of grasp what kind of character she was. I don't remember the second individual she was told to play like, but she was told to play like Clint Eastwood meets another character. I don't remember who's, unfortunately. But you get it from the instant, and you're like, oh, she is badass. She's great. And to see how she evolves from film to film, even down to the holiday special as well, it's lovely to see that she's not completely cyborg. She's not a robot. There is depth to her. She is a motherly figure, if you will, to the Guardians, and she quite literally carries the team at a lot of points. And I think that's special. I mean, if we go on to other characters as well.
It's almost really like a Pinocchio type storyline.
Yes, that's
kind of mixed up in there.
Yeah. It's almost like an amalgamation of stories, if you will. And I think that's really, really nice for a character like Nebula as well.
Mantis gets fleshed out.
Oh, I'm going to be honest with you. Ever since Guardians 2, I was mixed on Mantis. I thought she was a good character to have a laugh with because she created these awkward dynamics, these awkward situations. I knew a little bit about her from the comics as well, where she kind of had her own thing for a while, and then she kind of joined the team and left the team, and then she had some spin-off stuff. But I didn't really care much.
It's kind of a one-trick pony in the second movie.
Yeah,
The deadpan gags, which was kind of like alongside Drax.
Yeah.
But both that dynamic, but in her own way, she's just fleshed out.
Oh,
and given things to do this time. We get more of her storyline. And I just think the actress herself clearly has an affinity for the character.
Yeah.
It is a real joy when she's on screen this time.
Every time, yeah.
Whereas I thought in certain parts of the previous movie I could have done without her.
She didn't really need to be there in the previous movie at a lot of points. There was some good moments, but overall it was like, you're kind of there. And I still think she was great. It was just more of a, you kind of feel like an afterthought. But I'm really glad, though, that we've moved on from that, because it did kind of go into Infinity War and Endgame where she was still an afterthought. It was like, she's still there. And when we finally got to see the holiday special centre around Drax and Mantis, it felt like a treat, because it was like, oh, no. There's actual depth to this character. This is something that James Gunn has retconned in a way that's like, I actually could do with this more. Because there's a lot of times where comic book characters in Marvel, it almost feels like there's unnecessary changes. I mean, one of the biggest unnecessary changes, I am the Mandarin. No, you are not. And I'm just so glad that was retconned afterwards, because Shang-Chi's Mandarin is absolutely A tier. He is at his best. He's an incredible actor as well, just to sidetrack a little bit there. But finally, we got some moments with her in the holiday special where I was like, oh, I'm really ready for this character in Guardians 3. I was actually really looking forward to her more than a few other characters, admittedly. And she delivered every time. She didn't just have her moments where she was a joke. She actually had some depth, some emotional baggage as well that was like, oh yeah, no, she's suffering as much as everyone else. And, there was the nice twist as well, which I can say because holiday special, that Quill's sister is Mantis. And it's lovely because it's like Quill has had to grow up with, the torment of his mother dying, the torment of not knowing what happened to his grandfather because he was snatched away, and his father and father figure have both died. It was nice to finally see that he actually has family by a certain type of blood, if that makes sense. And not just that, but also the surrounding family being the Guardians themselves. That was lovely. But other characters?
Well, let's talk about Chris Pratt.
Oh my. Wow.
So Chris Pratt's had two of the biggest movies of the year so far.
Yeah, one's reached 1.1 billion, and the other is on track of making 400 million, I should say.
Like it.
Yeah, that would be a bit of a bomb if that was the case.
But I thought he was terrific in this. The friendship dynamic that he has with Rocket.
Oh, and the way it's evolved as well.
Beautiful. But also, there were times in this where he was actually allowed to act.
Yes.
And he genuinely made a big difference in this movie. I think because it's more of a team dynamic this time, and each individual character is allowed to shine, whereas in the first two, Star-Lord was the biggest part of the story.
Yeah.
He's there, on screen, just enough to give you everything you need from Star-Lord. And I think he's absolutely wonderful in this. So and he's allowed to be.
Yes.
And it's just so tight in terms of the set pieces that are on screen that you're getting the best of each part of that as it's set out throughout the entire film, including towards the end of the picture as well, which is again, it's so effectively done. So effectively done. The other parts to this film that we probably have to talk about, the music and score, I think they are brilliant.
They're incredible.
The quality of the cinematography, the storyline, there's magic in all these elements.
And it's something that I think other movies should look at in terms of the MCU. We've had, as I say, a dip. And I think it's because we now have this idea that we need to connect everything. We need to have She-Hulk connect to the greater MCU with the Hulk. We need to have an understanding as to how she gets her powers, and all of a sudden she is such and such with having these emotional aspects and not becoming a raging Hulk monster. But then also, that I didn't mind She-Hulk. I just thought that there was a lot of connection. It was just a bit like, please calm down. We have a She-Hulk that we need to get the idea of first. And it was also like that with a few other movies as well, with Multiverse of Madness needing to connect constantly to any other remote thing. I mean, we had the surprise at the end of that movie being the eye sticking out of his head. It was this third eye. It was like, whoa, oh, wow, there's some proper stuff going on here. Only to have the after credits, like 2 minutes later, confirm that, oh, he's fine. He's got a third eye. And it's almost feeling like a lot of the elements that would make something enriched with the stories are now being rushed. And I found that with phase one to 3, there was this great build-up, this dramatic sense of, oh, okay, so we've just had this story, and then we have the after credits to kind of linger you on. And that was something that was nice, because the main films themselves didn't have to connect to the grand scheme of things as such, because they got to tell their story at the end of the day. I mean, look at Captain America. I know that people are vexed on the first Captain America because it tells a war story. It's very bleak in the look and setting because the suit itself is not the vibrant blue with the vibrant red and white stripes. It's quite bleak because that is war. That is World War II. That is the setting of history that we need to look at. And it's nice that we get to see this fiction mixed in with non-fiction. And that's something that's beautiful. That's my opinion anyway. And that didn't really connect to anything else. It was just, there's the Tesseract. Cool. That's it.
Yeah, you could treat that film as a standalone film, but also as part of a bigger picture. Yeah. And that's something that the early ones, as you rightly say, specialised.
Yes.
Iron Man, Captain America, Thor.
Yes.
All those first movies, yes, they were setting up something greater, but they can stand alone on their own merit.
Exactly.
And that, I think, they've kind of become a bit obsessed with linking everything together.
It's like even in the middle of your movies, we now need to say, by the way, this is going to be on our Disney Plus show. By the way, that's our next movie.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, what?
I don't think fans work that way. I think if you go back to people that buy comic books, the people that buy Spider-Man comics
want it for Spider-Man.
Exactly.
They don't want it for Tony Stark to show up and give them kind of new technology every 5 minutes.
And they also don't necessarily want it to go into other realms.
No.
They want it to be something low level that's happening that could be an existential threat that's happening to that city or to things that are going on in his life.
And yeah, and the thing is now is that we now always have to ask the question of where's the Avengers? Where's the Avengers? Why isn't the Avengers involved in this situation? Why is there a giant Eternal sticking out of the Earth? I was going to say an expletive there, but I won't. But there is a giant, weird alien Eternal creature sticking out of the... Well, excuse me, let me correct myself. Celestial being sticking out of the ground that is well everywhere, and it's now a landmark. I mean, you can't just ignore it for the next 5 movies. That is now something that is there.
And yet that's exactly what they've done.
But the good news is that we're finally going to get an address of it in Captain America 4. My worry, is that going to be where they spawn adamantium? Is it not man-made anymore? Is it now going to be that the Hulk movie is basically Captain America 4, but we're not going to call it the Hulk movie? This is the worry now. We have this worry that the characters that we we love with this passion and with this great sense of relief that we get to see these characters again. And now we kind of just go, oh, well, that was actually the Hulk's movie. He was in it for 20% of the movie. That's my worry.
Coming back to this one, I'm glad that this didn't have Thor in it.
Exactly. I think Thor needed to be in his own world.
I mean, it was set up for him to be in it. I'm glad that he wasn't. I just think it was unnecessary. Presumably, Gunn saw that right from the offing, that his story was to talk about these characters that were really quite periphery characters initially. and he wants to tell them his way, and boy, did he get to do that.
Really did.
Just incredible.
As I say, it's some of the best writing in the MCU, and it's some of the best character storytelling as well, especially Rocket.
James Gunn will definitely be missed from Marvel, for sure. We can only hope that he's going to go and do good things at DC. But in the meantime, what I would say to you, if there's only one film you see this year, and we often say this, there's been some good ones this year.
There really have been some strong ones.
This, so far, and we're obviously expecting good things from the Flash movie soon.
Yes.
This so far is definitely the movie to see. It is just an amazing spectacle. I wouldn't wait to see it on Disney Plus in a few months' time. I would get your bonds down to the cinema.
This is a cinematic experience.
Go watch this. We fortunately didn't have too much of people chattering their way through. There was a little bit of it at the start, but yeah. I can wholeheartedly say, go and see this film with your family and friends in the cinema. It is a spectacle that you do need to see.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely brilliant.
Haunted Magazine is a publication dedicated to all things paranormal and spooky. Each issue features articles, interviews, and stories about ghosts, hauntings, and other unexplained phenomena. The magazine also covers topics such as cryptozoology, UFOs, and other aspects of the supernatural. Expect to find in-depth investigations of haunted locations, first-hand accounts of ghostly encounters, and reports of paranormal events and attractions. The magazine also includes features on the latest ghost hunting technology and techniques, as well as tips for those looking to search the supernatural on their own. Issue 37, The Frights of Spring, will be in stores from March 6th. So remember, don't be normal. Be paranormal, and order your copy today.
I'd just like to thank everybody for taking the time to listen to our podcast today. Please do subscribe if you like what we're doing, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.